Hello world, it's JWP, J Ward Primo Beats, coming to you live from my bedroom. I will be continuing along with looking at the SynthEdit manual, reading through it, and doing my best to document how to use SynthEdit. Just looking through some stuff here, and I need some stream helpers, chat box. Alright, we are in. However, I need some little windows. Oh, that's fine. I have so many windows. I don't want to open that one. I'll go like this and open it. Alright. So moving from the the views into the interface. Of course, that's not the current toolbar. Just checking my mic again. Mic check. Yeah. The toolbar provides one-click access to common SynthEdit functions as well as a graphical display of SynthEdit's total CPU usage. To show or hide the toolbar, do the following. Check or uncheck the toolbar from the View menu, View Toolbar, to quickly hide the floating toolbar. Click the Close button on the toolbar. So I imagine that's mentioning this up here, and I've already gone over that in the last video where I covered some UI, or it's in the UI video. However, we don't have a View menu anymore. File commands. So I'm really just going to go over these very briefly, as pretty much everything is intuitive. Create a new file. Okay, so they're very short. Create a new project. To create a new SynthEdit project, select File, New from the menu. Alternatively, click on the New Toolbar button. Open an existing project. To open an existing project, select File, Open from the menu. Alternatively, click Open on the Toolbar button. Open a project you used recently. Open a project you worked in recently. SynthEdit keeps track of the last 8 recently used projects you have opened in the File menu. On File, select the project from the list. So you can see here, here's the File menu, and we have a couple previous files or previous projects. Setting the project properties. Displays the project properties. To display project's properties dialog. So I believe that's that little window that gives you the information for a pop-up when you open a SE1 file. Saving a project. To save a currently open project, select File, Save from the menu. Alternatively, click on the Save Toolbar button. Saving a project with a different file name, which is alternatively known as a save as. To save a current project with a different file name, click File, Save As from the menu. Okay, this is getting redundantly boring. Save as a VST plugin. Saves the current project as a VST plugin. See also creating a VST plugin. Select File, Save as VST from the menu. I've also additionally gone over briefly saving a VST. Edit commands. Creating a container from a selection. Creating a container from a selection. To create a new container containing your current selection, select the objects you want inside the container. Select Edit Containerize Selection. So if we go back into our quick synth project here, let's get rid of second synth. Say I wanted to containerize these into a child synth. I select them all, and then I right click, More, and Containerize Selection. Now that everything will be stored inside of this container. Keep in mind, however, in order to view these on the panel, we have to activate controls on parent. And let's get that in place. Inversely, say if we wanted all those things back out, we just right click and go on containerize. However, I do want to mention, before I uncontainerize, controls on module. We click this will show the controls without the skin, doesn't look like, right inside of the structure view. Just a quick brief on that. I'm going to right click, More, uncontainerize. So now everything pops out and we're back here. I do believe that's what the help file is talking about here. Create a container from a selection. Connecting modules. Modules are connected together using patch cords. To add a patch cord, left click on the module's plug and drag to the new patch cord desired plug on the destination module. You see a picture here of a oscillator being plugged into an all-pass. SynthEdit automatically highlights the plugs you can connect the patch cord to as you move the mouse over them. So pretty straightforward. Click plug here. This is where I mentioned, you see this is blue and the patch will be blue. This is a float. Blue represents volts. Float is this gray, not sure it's a gray color. I'm colorblindish, so yeah, we click and drag, and because this is DSP, I don't need a conversion module. Volts will convert directly to float, and vice versa. Float will also additionally connect directly to volts. However, there are no, plugs on the left side of either of these plugs. So yeah, and float will not connect directly to patch. Additionally, connect directly to text rather. Additionally, this is a DSP module and this is a GUI module. So we can tell by this, we can distinguish them by their sort of background. We got like this lighter gray and we have this more darker gray, I do believe would be the term. It's a more vibrant gray. This is a more washed out gray. So this is a GUI module and this is a DSP module, which you cannot connect directly. Copy a selection. Select objects or objects you want to copy. Do one of the following to make a single duplicate. Select edit copy and then edit paste from the menu to make multiple duplicates. Select edit and then select edit paste until you have the desired number of copies. Alternatively, right click on a selection and select copy from the pop-up menu to copy it. Right click on the workspace you want the copy to paste. Right click on the workspace where you want to paste the copy and select paste. So very important, as I mentioned before in the previous video, it's better to right-click copy and right-click paste, and then wherever your mouse was, that's where it's going to drop the module. Now, if you say, we click this guy, I'm just going to delete this. Right-click, delete. So if I went and clicked this and I went edit, copy, see this is the grayed out. It's grayed out right now. I just have to click it again. It's back. So it's an oversight of the developer. Hopefully he's working on it. So we go copy, then we go paste. Now, where's that going to go? So it ended up there, which is fine, but what if it ended up like way over here and this was here? I find sometimes like when you're down over working in a different workspace and you paste, edit paste, it ends up in the top left corner. Just my 2 cents. So the preference for me is to right click copy, right click paste, opposed to Control C, Control V, V, V. They just pop up wherever they want. Yeah, that's also a different way to copy modules. So you can say copy, right click. You can click, then push Control Z, then right click and paste. However, pushing Control V, they're like, where is it going to pop up? Something to keep in mind. Deleting a selection. To delete a selection, press Del on the keyboard or select Edit Delete from the menu. Alternatively, right-click on the selection, select Delete. So to delete something, we have 3 different ways. We have right-click Delete. I'm just going to paste it back in. And we click on it and we push Delete on the keyboard. Gone. Paste it back in. And the third way, of course, is Edit Delete. Gone. So I'm going to put it back in. Grabbing a screenshot. So SynthEdit allows you to capture an image of the currently active view and save it as a PNG file. To capture a screen image, activate the view you wish to capture. Select Edit, Grab Screenshot. Select the location and file name to save the image as. So I'm not sure if that's still a thing. Doesn't look like it. No. So that's not a thing anymore. If you really need a screenshot, your keyboard likely has one that says Insert Print Screen or just Print Screen. If you hit that and you go into your Paint program and paste, you'll have your screenshot. Modern technology. I'm sure the print screen has always been there. Inserting a module. To insert a module, select the Insert menu, choose the module you want from the list. Alternatively, right-click in the workspace and choose Insert. So this is still current in the, I think it's the new view. I'm so used to using the new view. So right click insert, insert is still here. However, with the newer view, there's a new structure view, which I will cover later. But for now, the insert is there. In the newer view, it is not, which hopefully it will be. Inserting a prefab. To insert a prefab into a project, select prefab from the insert menu, insert prefab. SynthEdit opens a file select dialog in the prefabs folder. Browse to the required prefab file and click open. Alternatively, right click in the workspace, select prefab from the insert menu, insert prefab. SynthEdit opens as file select dialog in the prefabs folder. Browse to the required prefab file and click open. So I'm going to go in regular view here and right click, insert, and way at the top, prefab. And this will pop open my prefab deep within the public folder, which is where the prefabs get stored. Locking a containers view. Okay, so we've covered this. It's in two places. This is the third place. I'm not going over it. Moving a selection. To move selected objects on the panel or in the workspace, click on the title bar of a panel in the current selection. Drag the selection to a new location. Straightforward. I've pretty much been doing that. So you got your mouse and your left click. You can make these bounding boxes. Whatever's inside of the bounding boxes gets selected. Select more than one thing at once, and to move them around, you left click, hold, and move around. And additionally, for more advanced, if you want to call it advanced, really, it's straightforward. You can select more than a few, hold control, and you can select or deselect things at your whim, while still holding control, of course. I'm not sure what shift does. Let's try shift. Okay, so holding shift also additionally adds to, but it doesn't take away. Holding shift and clicking things again just leaves them selected. Hold control to unselect. This is pretty much a general Windows function. Muting a module. So I believe we've covered this already. Opening a container structure, again covered. It was in the previous video. Selecting objects. There are several ways to select objects in SynthEdit. So selecting one object. To select a single object, do the following. Click on the object with the mouse. Click Edit, select to display the select dialog, and choose the object from the list. Okay, so this is a little different. This is something that's interesting and I wished would be improved upon for connecting things. However, I'm not about to get into that. So there is an edit and a select menu somewhere, wasn't there? Right click, maybe. Maybe it's gone now. It's been such a long time since I've used it. Okay, so what does it say? Where is it? Edit select. Is it gone? Looks like it's gone. Bugger. Yeah, there used to be a select menu that would show you a list of all the modules, and then you clicked, which module you wanted to select, and then you can connect two modules together and stuff, and it's too bad. It was an awesome function. There's another knock at workflow. Selecting multiple objects. To select multiple objects within a window, hold the Shift key and click on an object added to the selection. Left click above the group of objects and drag a selection box around several objects. Over that. Select all objects in a window. To select all objects in a window, press Ctrl A. Alternatively, choose Edit, select all from the menu. Okay, so that's something I didn't cover. So you can push Ctrl A and grab everything. You can move everything. Additionally, Edit, select all. Again, everything. And from there, you can even hold Control and individually. Yeah. Setting SynthEdit preferences. To open SynthEdit's preference dialog, adjust configuration settings. Select Edit Preferences from the main menu. Okay, so I've been waiting to cover this. We're going to cover this now. Preferences. So here is the Preferences dialog. Audio and MIDI. So I do not believe Windows comes with a MIDI in or out, or a MIDI in anymore. It used to be, I can't even remember, Windows MIDI Mapper. However, it is available on the internet. Last I checked, there is someone who is releasing it. That's a whole nother topic. Alternatively, there's MIDI loopbacks. There's several of those available. Something for another time, perhaps. If anybody wants me to do a video on that, documenting how to set those kinds of things up. I'm sure I could find the time for it. Delay compensation. I never knew this was part of preferences. It's interesting. Again, that's some modules create delay, or create latency rather. So set that here. And your audio driver, of course, I have like a million. And I use FL Studio ASIO. I can jump into the setup, and it's destined that it's probably going to crash. There it goes. Bye bye. Okay, so let's get back into SynthEdit. And I lost my awesome synth project, so I'm just going to recover that very quick. And this was called Simple Synth. I don't know. I'll call it Simple Synth. I'll jump right back in there. See, that's what I said. If you use FL Studio ASIO, because it allows you to get my mug happening here. Did I pop up? Doesn't look like it. No, I don't think I did. It's too bad. Am I? I don't know. This button work or not? No, it doesn't. Strange. Yeah, well, I just gotta. Whatever. So yes, using the FL Studio ASIO allows your driver to share and still utilize the low latency of ASIO. By sharing, I mean you can have, your Firefox running music whilst you're synth editing. In FL Studio, this is true as well. You could be, browsing Splice and still have FL Studio running audio in the background with low latency. So ASIO is a driver that provides low latency. And the standard ASIO for all software driver hogs the driver. So when you're running ASIO for all, it makes it so only the program running ASIO for all is allowed to create audio. File locations. This is your MIDI files, apparently because you need MIDI files somewhere. Audio files, and this is where it looks for audio files. VST2 plugins. This is where your VST2 plugins that generates this VST plugins list. Modules SEM. This is your third-party modules. These are general locations. I find them. They are, pretty generic. I think everybody uses these common files: VST2, VST3, and SynthEdit sticks itself in the common files folder and modules deeper. Alternatively, you can go program files SynthEdit modules. Decision is totally up to someone else. Your dad. Open last project on startup. I don't like doing this because if you had a big project running last time and every time you start SynthEdit, you just want to throw something together right quick, you're going to open that huge project you had last time. So I like to leave this unchecked and it just, opens SynthEdit and it's blank. Undo enabled. Undo is broken. Do not use undo. You can try it and experiment with it. You're jumping off the deep end, because undo will either crash SynthEdit or it will take forever to undo something, as well as redo. Suppress wave file errors. So sometimes if you have a sampler running and you have a wave file loaded in there, and then you come back to the project later and you have moved that wave file, SynthEdit is going to throw an error. It says suppress wave file errors. I'm not sure if this works, because in the past when I've used it, it doesn't do much. Registration, of course, I'm not sure if my key is going to show up, so I'm just going to throw BRB up. Okay, so it didn't show my key, it's just my name, which is fine. Then you can clear your registration. So registration name, I think it gives you a code or something too. It's been a while since I programmed that. Moving on through the manual. Snap to grid, important. Snap to grid. This option causes modules to snap to an invisible grid when moved in the structure or panel views, making it easier to align modules and controls. To toggle the snap to grid option on or off, select snap to grid from the menu, edit snap to grid. So I mentioned before, yeah, it's like super important for GUI, not so much for what's it called, structure or the DSP stuff, but for GUI it is a blessing, especially specifically now in 1.4 that Canvas snaps to the grid. I believe the other one that didn't snap to grid in the past was the rectangle. And yeah, just moving these things around. A lot of things didn't snap to grid in the past. Now that they do, it makes developing GUI so much easier. A rectangle is just a GUI placeholder function. It's similar to what I covered last time, the panel group. However, that's looking at modules, which we are not doing today. Undo, redo, and action. SynthEdit maintains a list of the last 20 actions you perform and lets you undo each in sequence. Similarly, you can also redo any action that you have undone by using the redo command. To undo the last action you performed, click Edit Undo. If you click Undo again, SynthEdit will undo the action you performed before that, and so on. To redo the last action you undid, click Edit Redo. You must have undo enabled in order to enabled in order to undo redo. I'm sorry, I'm getting a quick kick out of these tongue twisters. I should get rid of my face here. It's not working. How to actually go right in here? And this button sucks. Oh, whatever. My mug's all part of the video now. Viewing a module's properties. Properties view. Okay, we covered the properties. That's this side part here. This will tell you what's going on. Say for instance, you got your list entry or your slider. We didn't look at this yet. Slider. Yeah. This will give you your ranges. Kind of feeling like I'm not really covering a lot, like the actual usage of SynthEdit. However, I said this was the manual, so skins. You can change the appearance of SynthEdit's panel by using a skin. A skin is a set of graphical images that SynthEdit uses when drawing the panels, panel groups, and standard controls such as the slider module. SynthEdit stores all its skins in a folder called skins under the folder where SynthEdit is installed. Every different skin has its own folder. The default folder contains the standard blue background and knobs which SynthEdit always uses to draw controls in structure view, and also assigns this skin to any panels by default. So here's a picture of a folder hierarchy. So skins is inside of public. So it'd be users public SynthEdit project skins or something like that. So it is in the public folder. That's where the skins are stored, unfortunately. I really wish that would change because, you design this great skin and then you have to migrate or, format your computer and you forget that skins are in public. And not only that, there's a global file in there that, details how skins are controlled and colors. And if that global disappears, I spent, a couple months building a global and then I lost it and I didn't back it up. And it was in public. Anyway, so that's where skins are. They are in the public folder. Note, do not delete or rename the default folder. Doing so will cause undesirable behavior and may cause SynthEdit to crash. Selecting a skin. Panels use skin to determine the graphical look of the panel and controls in it. Each panel can use a different skin if required. Panels use the SynthEdit default skin by default. So I've already covered this. Installing a new skin. Here we go. To install a new skin, create a new folder for the skin in the skins folder where SynthEdit is installed. Example, C program files, SynthEdit skins, my new skin. Copy the skin files into the folder. Restart SynthEdit. SynthEdit uses the name of the folder that contains the skin when referring to the skin in a module's property view. Note, if the installed skin does not contain all required images, SynthEdit will display any missing skins part using items from the default skin. Alright, so in the public folder, under skins, you want to start a new folder. Generally what I do is I copy default, and I paste it, and then I rename default, and then I start editing or replacing the default components that are in there, and that will update once you change the skin. Go into panel edits, and you go skin. It'll change once you change this from here for that panel. Yeah. Removing a skin. To remove an installed skin, close SynthEdit. Oh, that's right too. I should mention when you're editing skins, every time you make an edit, you do have to restart SynthEdit to update the visual appearance of the skin, I do believe. To remove an installed skin, close SynthEdit, delete the folder, the SynthEdit skin folder that contains the skin. Example, yes. C, program file, SynthEdit skins, red skin. So this would be C users, I think. SynthEdit? No, C users public SynthEdit skins. Red skin. Restart SynthEdit. If a project contains references to a skin that no longer exists, SynthEdit will issue a warning message and automatically replaces all references with the default skin. So a little error box here. Cannot find the racy red using default. VST plugins. So this is a big can of worms. I'm going to look at how much time I have. Half hour in. Not sure if I'm going to make it completely through the manual. However, we're going to do what we can. VST plugin. VST, Virtual Studio Technology. Plugins are software technology designed by Steinberg and are a software version of traditional recording studio hardware, such as delay lines, reverbs, and limiters. VST instruments are also available that reproduce specific hardware synthesizers or other electronic musical instruments. VST plugins can be plugged into any host that supports them, allowing the same VST plugin to be used with many different audio programs, including SynthEdit. Copyright notice. VST is a trademark of Steinberg Soft UND Hardware GmbH. Using VST plugins with SynthEdit. Creating VST plugins. Okay, so using VST plugins with SynthEdit, I'm going to cruise right through this because I mentioned in the past it's pretty much frowned upon. There's no real reason to do so. I mean, you can have a spectral visualizer, your own spectrogram, tools and stuff. However, bringing VST plugins into SynthEdit to accommodate the final product is a bad idea. Finding VST plugins. SynthEdit doesn't ship with any VST plugins. You'll need to buy or download them yourself. If you use other audio software, you may already have VST plugins that you want to use. There are also many VST plugins available on the internet. Many of them are free to download, or you can make your own using SynthEdit. A good place to start is Steinberg's website, which offers some free downloads. Also check out SynthEdit's VST page for some other links. Installing VST plugins. SynthEdit automatically loads VST plugins from the VST plugins folder that is set in the Preferences dialog. Default C program files, SynthEdit VST plugins. For me, it's C program files, common files, VST2. To install a new VST plugin, do the following, or VST3. Use a plugins installer if provided. Copy the plugin to the VST plugins folder. Once installed, VST plugins appear as options in the insert menu under VST plugins. To classify your plugin by type, you can create subfolders in the VST plugins folder. Each new folder will appear as a new heading on the VST plugins menu. Muting a VST plugin. You can temporarily muting a module. Same thing. We covered that. Using a VST plugin. Using VST plugins. SynthEdit treats VST plugins just like any other module. Inserting VST plugins into a SynthEdit project and connecting them is done exactly the same as with normal SynthEdit modules. All installed VST plugins are added to the insert menu under the heading VST plugins, or insert VST plugins. Example, using the Steinberg VB plugin. This example will show how easy it is to use VST plugins and effects with SynthEdit. Download the VB1 virtual plugin from Steinberg's website. Look for the demo software page or search for VB1 and save the file to a temporary location on your hard drive. Don't worry, it's a very small download. Once you have downloaded the plugin, if SynthEdit is already running, close it. Copy the vb1.dll file to your VST plugins folder. Launch SynthEdit. If everything is done correctly, SynthEdit will have added VB1 as a module into the insert menu, or insert VST plugins VB1. If the plugin does not show up, make sure that your VST plugins folder is set correctly in the SynthEdits preference dialog. To use VST plugins, create a new SynthEdit project. Add the VB1, insert VST plugins VB1. Add a keyboard module, insert controls keyboard. Add a sound out module, insert input output sound out. Connect the modules together as shown below. Got a picture here of a keyboard plugging into the VB box module guy. And then signal out twice into a sound out module, and 1 and 2, channel 1 and 2. Click on SynthEdit's play button and click on the on-screen keyboard to play the VST. So yes, this was is a VST bass, and with the keyboard you can push the keys and stuff, and it would play the notes with the audio engine running, pretty much making SynthEdit a host. In the past, I think one of the aspects of SynthEdit was to be a host, and you could create your own music and render your own music straight out of SynthEdit. It wasn't always meant to be a VST development or audio plugin development platform. At one time, it was actually a DAW or sequencer itself, Groovebox. Creating VST plugins. Creating a VST plugin. Whoa. Okay, creating a VST plugin. Once you're familiar with creating synths in SynthEdit, you can save your work as a VST plugin that you can use with other host applications that support VST, such as Cubase VST, Fruity Loops, Cycle, etc. You can even use the VST in SynthEdit too, of course, but SynthEdit's native format uses less CPU and memory than a VST within SynthEdit. So we're saying there, like, it's better to just use the modules than it is to bring in a VST to, do the SynthEdit Groovebox stuff. A VST plugin is read-only. You still have the original SynthEdit file, though, if you wish to modify the construction of the VST. Design considerations. Your SynthEdit patch must be in a container, like the SynthEdit prefab synths. The inputs and outputs of the container represent the inputs and outputs of the VST plugin. You can have as many audio inputs and outputs as you need, but be aware that many VST hosts have limitations. Many VST hosts expect a plugin instrument to have exactly 2 outputs, left and right. Synths may have a MIDI input pin. Options plugin is synth is disabled unless you have a MIDI input pin. You may also have a MIDI output if necessary. Not all hosts support MIDI out. Not all hosts support MIDI on effect plugins. So, synths should have a MIDI input pin, otherwise you can't really control a synth. It is possible to have a synth that doesn't have a MIDI input pin, such as a generative synth, I guess, that just kind of randomly shoots noise. Pink noise generator, white noise generator. The option plugin is synth in the VST export. That's where it'll tell the host after export that your creation is a synth. And that's disabled unless you have a MIDI input on your top level container. You may also have a MIDI output if necessary. Currently, SynthEdit does not support MIDI out. Not all hosts support MIDI out. So in the past, it's likely that there may be still some hosts that don't have they don't support MIDI output on generator plugins. Not all hosts support MIDI on effect plugins. Okay, so this is a really wide bridge, and there is the possibility to have an effect plugin controlled by, say, a MIDI. I'm not talking about MIDI control, MIDI CC. I'm talking about like notes. You can change like a key trigger, what have you. That's advanced topic. Some SynthEdit modules, like the MIDI player module, accesses external files. If you distribute a VST plugin, you must ensure that all required files are distributed to either manually or included in the embedded file tab when saving as a VST. See distributing sound fonts and samples and MIDI with a VST for more information. Any necessary skin files, images, and SEM modules are automatically included for you. I'm not going to elaborate on that. That's pretty straightforward. You can embed other VST plugins within your plugins, but again, you will need to keep any embedded VST DLL files in the same folder. Yeah. So I mean, if you're making your own and you want to couple together, that's fine, but you don't be, throwing someone else's VST inside your VST. That's not, you can't redistribute that unless, of course, it's open source. So that's another topic for not another time. If you patch a synthesizer, it should usually include a patch select module. I think that's patch, what is it called now? Patch select module, that is under MIDI, and it's patch automator, patch browser. Patch automator, that's for a MIDI CC stuff, and patch browser, this is what it's called now. So if your patch is a synthesizer, it should usually include a patch browser module. This gives the user several patches to choose from. If you intend to distribute your VST plugins, do either create several patches as a starting point for the user. The patch select bar at the top of your panel is not exported with the VST. Each plugin host, Cubase, Fruity Loops, etc. should provide an equivalent patch selection function. Same goes for bank load save. So what that's saying is that even though there is a bar up here, see if I hop into panel edit. Oh, it's not there anymore. Okay, so it used to be a bar up there. I can load it, but that's a bad idea. No, it's still not there. Where is it? Patch automator. It's totally gone now. Well, either way. So presets are a topic for another time. However, I'll mention them briefly. You need to build a GUI system to browse through presets. And this is a preset browser up here for when you're creating inside SynthEdit. However, VST2 and VST3 have different ways of managing their presets. Presets are like, you have a few knobs that are controlling things such as, the way a certain sound is made. Sound design, you have it set one way, and that's one preset, and then you change it, and it sounds different. It's from a bass to a synth, then that's a different preset, and you have to either build a preset browser inside of your synth, or the host is expected to have that. It is the responsibility of the VST host application to filter all MIDI data sent to your VST plugin. Your VST plugin should respond to MIDI on all channels. Set any channel settings to all on the MIDI to CV module, for example. So that's your MIDI in. The host, FL Studio, whatever, is responsible for pretty much funneling or filtering the proper channel to the synth. Size your synth's control panel view so you can see all the controls, as it will be frozen to the size when it saves as a VST plugin. So SynthEdit currently does not support screen resizing. However, using vectors or high resolution graphics will help when you use your host to resize plugins. Whereas FL Studio, you can scale your plugins. The older plugins you can scale up. Unfortunately, this is kind of a little bit of a bruise on the market. Some plugin vendors do have resizing. However, like I said, SynthEdit does not. The VST plugin's 4-character identifier is very important. It is used by the VST host application to tell it apart from others. Each plugin you distribute must have different 4-character identifier. You will be prompted for this when you choose Save as VST option. I covered that in the first video. Registered users can use the nag screen option when saving a VST plugin. This causes your VST to display its info dialog at random, also displayed by right-click About. Save options. Output as stereo pairs. Causes the Cubase mixer to link the left and right volume control. Otherwise, you will get 2 independent volume sliders. Plugin is synth. So I mentioned that in the previous video. Plugin is synth informs host plugin is an instrument, not an effect, requires a MIDI input pin. Of course, I've mentioned that recently. Unregistered neg user pop-ups the dialog box at random intervals, usually to remind the end user to register your plugin. Use the info help box to enter whatever message you want. Mono use okay. Okay, so this is something I'm interested in. For effect plugins with two inputs which can function okay on a mono signal sent to only the first input, requires at least two input pins. Okay, so I don't know what happens if, you send a mono signal with, or you send a stereo signal without this check. Programs. Sets how many presets are accessible. The option is disabled and limited to a maximum 16 in an unregistered SynthEdit. Fonts. Oh, excuse me. 1 second. Unfortunately, it is illegal to distribute most fonts yourself. Avoid using uncommon fonts in your VST plugins. Since fonts are not automatically distributed to end users, uncommon fonts will be substituted with a different font. Often the substitute is slightly different size, resulting in your plugin displaying wrong. For best results, use only core Windows fonts. Google XP Windows XP standard fonts for a current list. Alternatively, you can sometimes substitute text drawn as an image. So with fonts, there is Google Fonts. There is, in the modern age, there is lots of redistributable fonts. I recommend using and utilizing the free redistributable fonts. However, places where you're uncertain if you're allowed to redistribute them, avoid. Substituting text as a drawing is an option. However, when scaling, because SynthEdit doesn't have resize screen, when you're scaling, fonts scale better than images. There's another more intermediate way of doing that with images where it'll redraw images. However, I'm not going to get into that. Notes. SynthEdit built VSTs are usually at least 2 megabytes. This is because each plugin contains all of SynthEdit's built-in modules, regardless of how many you actually used. External modules, also known as SEM files, are only included in your VST if your synth uses them. The first time your VST plugin is used, SEM modules are unloaded to disk. SynthEdit puts them in a subfolder with the same name as your plugin. These embedded SEMs are not reusable in SynthEdit. Windows Vista users note that by default, Vista products the C program files folder. SynthEdit VSTs will not unload correctly in the folder or any subfolder. You can fix this by changing the folder's permissions. There is a limitation of how many DLLs, SEM, and VSTs can load at the same time, approximately 300. You can load, say, 10 different VST synths, each with 30 SEMs, but any more than that will fail. This is the limitations of Windows, unfortunately. You can improve things by using SEMs that contain multiple modules. Example, I recently combined all patch memory modules into one SEM file. Also SynthEdit's built-in modules if possible. In version 1.1, many conversion modules are now included with SynthEdit. You can reduce the overall SEM count. Third-party developers can also help by packaging related modules together in one SEM. So this is still true. DAWs, hosts, SynthEdit can only open so many type VST plugins. It has something to do with internals of computers. I'm not going to get into it right now. Windows did promise to open this to a wider span. I'm not sure if they ever did, but currently I do believe it's 300. So you say you're in your DAW and you want to open, you can't open more than 300 plugins. I'm not sure if this is totally true, but as far as I know, that's what I heard. And Windows or Microsoft was supposed to expand this. However, I'm not sure if it's part of stock Windows 10 or 11. Customized skin files are merged into the VST plugin DLL file. You do not need to embed them yourself. SynthEdit stores only the images actually used in your project. With VST3 and the modern SynthEdit 64 bits, this is not the case. They will dump once you start up once you load the VST for the first time, it'll dump all of its assets right into the file, which is unfortunate, but it's the way it is. When you inspect the properties of a VST DLL file, you see various information such as version number, copyright. You can't set these directly from SynthEdit. To do so, you need a resource editor. There are many available free on the internet. Which is true, something to look into. It's the best to use images only from your SynthEdit skin folder. Usually, your skin folders see users' public SynthEdit skins. Any VST plugin you create will not have access to files in other folders. If you change your default folder, you need to reload any bitmaps that use those images. So if you're going to be using any images, put them in with your skin. Effect types. There are 3 categories. Master. These are applied to the entire mix. Send. These are an auxiliary send on a hardware mixer. Any channel can send some audio to these. The result gets mixed into the master mix, or one of the buses. Send effects are mono in, stereo out. Insert. These apply to an individual channel. All audio from that channel goes through the effect. I created several effects in SynthEdit. Combinations of 1 or 2 audio inputs, 1 or 2 outputs. And with mono use OK, set or not. The results, any combination of 1 in, 1 out, 1 in, 2 out, 2 in, 2 out will work as an insert or master effect. 1 in, 2 out, or 2 in, 2 out with mono use OK will work as a send effect. So in English, most plugins appear to work as a master or insert effect. Only plugins with 1 input and 2 outputs work as a send effect. Plugins with 2 inputs will also work if you select mono use OK, which means it will function correctly with input signals or just one of its 2 inputs. Plugins with more than 2 inputs or more than 2 outputs will not load effects in some hosts, like Orion. Alright, that was a whole lot of word salad. So I guess that pretty much explains mono use OK. I'm sure there are still people who use send effects. I don't really use send effects. Something to keep in mind. Automatic reload of VST plugins. SynthEdit's auto reload feature makes testing your VST plugins easy by scanning your VST plugin folder every 15 seconds. If your plugin's file date changes because you have completed a new version, SynthEdit automatically reloads the plugin for you. When a plugin is reloaded by SynthEdit, the file creation time is displayed on the plugin's module. This process to make the process relatively painless, you should be able to configure C++ to compile directly to your VST plugins folder. Auto reload must be activated before you insert your plugin into a project. I have never heard of this. Distributing sound fonts wave in MIDI files. Often a VST needs to load sound font automatically. For example, your VST may use sound fonts as built-in waveforms. On the user's NPC, these sound fonts need to be installed in the plugins folder. Example, VST plugin, MySynth DLL, sound font, drum, sound SF2. VST path, C, program files, common files, VST3, mysynth.vst. Sound font path, so the sound font needs to be in the same folder. C, program files, common files, VST3, mysynth, drums.sf2. The sound font is in the same folder as the VST plugin. Ideally, you want to create an installer that copies both VST and sound fonts to the customer's hard drive. Relative paths. Since you don't know user end plugins folder, store sound font file names as a relative path. A relative path does not contain the full drive or folder specification. Example, see some folder. So when you're referencing sound fonts in your samplers, be sure to reference them as relative so that they're in the same folder. I do believe that's where your audio is. Maybe it'll tell us. But so relative and not the exact location. Before you export as VST, check your sample player module is using relative paths. Select the module, locate any file parameter, example sample loader 2 file name on the properties panel at the far right. Check the value column contains a relative file name like drums.sf2. If it contains a folder reference like C samples drums.sf2, you need to remove the drive and folder parts. Simplifying the file names can prevent them from loading in SynthEdit's editor. In the SynthEdit editor, because SynthEdit no longer knows what folder they are in, you can either ignore these warnings and revert to the file names after you've exported the plugin, or put the sound fonts in SynthEdit's default audio file location. Look in menu, edit preferences, file locations, audio files for this folder. This is where SynthEdit looks for relative file names. To have SynthEdit automatically use relative paths, you must set your default audio folder before you load sound font, not after. Otherwise, SynthEdit will use the full path. Alternatively, set the default audio folder, then unload the sound font and reload the sound font. So I was correct. The relative paths are the the preferences file locations audio files, which is here. So this is where your sound fonts should be, or your audio patches or images should go in your skin though. Yeah, okay, so we covered that. Troubleshooting problems with the VST plugin. How am I doing for time? 10 minutes left. Still never covered everything. Well, we're pretty much just about done. I could cover the rest, I suppose. Troubleshooting problems with using VST plugins in SynthEdit. VST plugins don't always behave as they should. Some make assumptions about host applications, SynthEdit in this case. If you encounter a VST plugin that doesn't work or crashes SynthEdit, there are two options in the module's property dialog that may rectify the problems. Process Replace Fix. This setting is known to fix problems with Steinberg's VB and Neon plugins. Data Alignment Fix. Some plugins expect a particular sample block size or alignment. This option is known to work for SC Virtual Sampler and SampleMate plugins. So I've never seen those before either. Maybe they were part of 1.1. These options can be used either together or separately. You may need to experiment to find the settings that work correctly. Note: don't don't use a fix if you don't need to. They do not reproduce. They do not reduce performance a little. They do reproduce. Do not use a fix if you don't need to. They do reduce performance a little. Don't. I'm getting a bit delirious. This is making me tired. Known problems with SynthEdit built-in plugins and other hosts. Again, known problems with SynthEdit built plugins and other hosts. Image line Fruity Loops. Plugin panel may freeze for a few seconds when first used. This is due to Fruity Loops VST implementation. Details. SynthEdit uses a buffer between panel and audio engine to communicate control movement events. The panel puts events in the buffer, the audio engine removes them. When the audio engine is paused, SynthEdit bypasses the buffer. Plugin hosts use the resume function to signal the audio engine is starting. The problem is Fruity Loops uses the resume function when the plugin is first loaded, whether the audio engine is running or not, and hence the buffer is not emptied. After moving the control a little, the buffer fills up, thereby blocking any further control movements. SynthEdit uses a timeout mechanism to detect the condition, hence the short freeze, until SynthEdit rectifies the problem by emptying the buffer. SynthEdit 1.1 will have improved communication methods that handle the condition a lot better. So this is like ancient news. I doubt that this still happens. I'm pretty sure the developers from ImageLine and SynthEdit have rectified this. There's new problems, but you'll have to cross those bridges when you come to them. MIDI automation. As well as using MIDI to select patches, you can control individual slider modules or knobs within a container via MIDI as well. To add MIDI automation support, insert a patch automator module. Insert MIDI patch automator into control within your project. This adds MIDI automation support to all other controls within the same container. Alright, so this is the patch automator here. It is available under MIDI. and patch automator. And as well, you should probably bring a MIDI in from the parent. And what this will do, say, over to that patch browser, grab a quick control. This is just a very dry example. We have the MIDI here. So this is where learn, edit, unlearn. It's subject for another time. However, say if you have like a USB knob system, sliders, knobs. This is where that's what that's referring to. Usually the DAW handles this, or the host usually handles this, but you still need the patch automator, I imagine. We're transitioning into SynthEdit 1.5, which will depreciate 32-bit and VST2. So VST2 does need this. I'm not certain about VST3. There is a bit of problems right now with the internal systems. However, I recommend using the patch automator. To configure the module, right-click the container that the automator is inside. Choose automation below are the various fields. Okay, so yeah, it's right here. Click this controller, this slider, and it's right here. MIDI. Click Learn Edit, and you get this box with CP, RPN, SysEx, poly trigger, poly gate, poly pitch, velocity known on, off, voice ID, the benders, a little bit of problems, glide pitch, start, channel pressure. I think that's what's it called, aftertouch. So generally the only one that you'd want to look at is CC. I'm not sure if these kinds of things can really handle SysEx yet. Pretty sure it's there. We do have some new modules for that kind of thing. So SysEx, yeah. I'd give it a shot, but I don't really have anything that does SysEx. Here you can specify which controller each slider will send and receive. You can use this to automate parameter changes from a sequencer or to control your synth from an external MIDI control surface. You can enable or disable automation via the container's MIDI automation button. Learn will automatically assign the next received controller. Press the play button before using this feature. Unlearn will clear the controller. Edit Assign opens the assign controller dialog, so you can choose from a range of MIDI controllers. So we got a couple of pictures here. These are old pictures. There's a patch automator. That doesn't look like that anymore. And see, that's used to be the preset browser. Now I believe it's up here. And this is the properties panel. This used to be called automation, but now it's just right here. Details, I'm not going to touch that because I do not even know what that does myself. Something new coming. And this next picture here, we have the assigned controller. Of course, we've just seen that. I'm going to edit the assigned controller. CC, like I said, CC and SysEx are probably the only ones. SysEx, far-fetched, but CC will be the one. And that's generally only for VST2. I'm not sure how VST3 is working with this. In my experience, it doesn't work. Okay, so note, MIDI controller number 32 through 63 are special fine-tuned controllers. Example, controller number 32 affects controller 0, mod wheel. Avoid setting SynthEdits automation to these controllers. When setting a SysEx system exclusive controller, you need to enter the message as hexadecimal numbers. Example, I'm not reading that, it's a register. The LL and MM are special. They will be substituted by the knob's MSB or LSB values. These depend on the knob's position. MSB is a value between 0 and 127, representing the knob's approximate position. LSB is the fine-tune value. Okay, so this is a lot of advanced MIDI stuff. I barely grasp it. I did, delve deep into it a couple times. SysEx isn't something I've used. I do like SysEx for, DX7 patches or the roll-in patches, bringing them in. You get, the VSTs that have that, such as, what's one? The really good one there, the FM7 synth. Oh, I can't even remember the name. Too focused here, too deep. But there are VSTs that will load patches from hardware machinery that were exported as SysEx patches. So SysEx special characters, LL. Controller, least significant byte, 14-bit controller. Most significant byte, 14-bit controller. VB, 7-bit value, similar to MSB. Roland style checksum. You can connect the patch automator to a MIDI monitor to check that it's working as you expect. Remember to connect patch automator module to your MIDI source, same as for MIDI CV. So I think what it's saying is that, yeah, make sure you're bringing the MIDI in. Same with a MIDI CV. MIDI to CV2. I mean, if you throw it down, yeah, it's there and it's going to do this stuff, but you have to bring it in. It's like, so your host out here, imagine, and the host needs to see this MIDI in, and then it's its responsibility to do the channel stuff. However, alternatively, you can, specify a specific channel in here, and you can make that available to your end user by using a list entry. So yeah, but preferably stick to all. And then that list entry ends up on your panel. You could say, my synth responds on this channel. Channel synths respond. Say only only channel 1 for this synth. And then it doesn't even matter if your DAW's shoving, a bunch of channels down it, it's only going to respond to channel 1. However, with all that said, SynthEdit currently only has channel 1, so stick to all. With the current integration or iteration with SynthEdit 1.4, yes, there is only one channel, and that's channel 1. All these other channels are no longer available as an input, and there is no MIDI output. VST automation. Any plugin parameter can be automated via MIDI controller messages. For example, the modulation wheel on a keyboard are the MIDI controller functions of most sequencers. To see a plugin's automation settings, right-click on the plugin and choose automation. So a little picture here of, say you have a VST loaded in here, and you're trying to look at the automations. Let's open up anything I could just use. Basic synth. And it's going to crash. There we go. Is it non-existent? Guess that's not going to work. Yeah. SFZ player. I don't think any of these are really here. I don't know why they're still there. Anyway, yeah, so that's just showing that you can control parameters inside. If you had a synth here, probably ends up over here. I don't know. Set the controller number from the drop-down list menu. Controllers 98 to 100 are registered parameter numbers. These are used in conjunction with RPM number box to provide you with more than 95 standard controllers. For example, you can control one parameter with RPM number 1 and independently with RPM number 2. I'm not sure what that's talking about. Patch selection. Hardware synths and effects units allow you to store different programs or patches for quick recall. SynthEdit can too. Usually your SynthEdit patch will be in a container. To add support for storing patches, simply insert a patch automator module to the container. Insert MIDI patch select. Okay, so that's patch browser in modern times. I mean, I could probably, dig the other one out of old. So that was old, so that wasn't there anymore. Is it? Patch info? Does it show? Does it show the old view? No. Alright. So, using your SynthEdit patch will be in a container. To add support for storing patches, simply insert patch automator module to the container. Insert MIDI, and this is called patch browser, or preset browser rather. This will add a patch display window to the container module and extra patch selection controls to the container's panel view. So we can see a picture here of the master container, and then the GUI, and there's a bar on top, which is no longer existent and is now up here. Polyphony. How much time do I have? I'm already over, but I'm getting close to finishing. Maybe not. I wonder if I should call it there. Polyphony is a big subject. I think I will wait till next week to look at polyphony, because it is a little difficult to explain and is a little advanced. We'll just skip right over it. Rendering to disk. I don't even know if this is still a thing. With software synthesis, it is very easy to overload your PC's processing power. This results in clicks, stuttering, and audio dropouts. To overcome this, SynthEdit supports writing your music to a WAV file. You wait while the music is recorded to hard disk, then play the WAV file afterward. This feature is called render to disk or offline rendering. In this mode, you effectively have no CPU limitations. You can have as many synths, drum machines, or effect modules as you like. You can use 44, 48, or even 96 kilohertz sample rates, no problems. So this was probably during the days when, SynthEdit was perceived also as a groove box or a DAW itself. This is not as interactive as real-time output, but you are no longer limited to just 2 synths. You can have as many as you like, plus drum modules, effects, and record at high-quality sample rates, like 44K or better. To render the disk, use a wave recorder module in place of your sound out module. Use a MIDI player module to send music data to your synths. Do not use any MIDI in or MIDI out, MIDI sound in or sound out modules. These modules switch SynthEdit to real-time mode. You can mute these modules to deactivate them. Set the recording time, open the Waves Recorder's property window. The recording time limit is in seconds. To start the rendering, press play. During rendering, SynthEdit CPU bar changes to the progress bar to indicate how much audio has been rendered. So I do believe this is still possible to create, to still run SynthEdit as like a type of groove box, as a, have a bunch of synths all, a bunch of VSTs or just standard SynthEdit modules, have, your projects running here. You got a drum project, you got a synth project, and then you bring in a MIDI player and you slap that file in there, file name, gate and trigger. Actually, I don't know. That's how it would work. Anyway, it's the future now. So. And then for output, this wave recorder, right? Wave recorder, right? And then that'll come, of course, IO module on the other side. And then of course your synth, we'll just say it's the pitch here. That comes out. Of course, it comes out twice because it's stereo. And then that goes there. That like that. And then you set your file name, you format, time limit, and then you'd hit play and it would record. It would run that MIDI through the synth. Of course, you'd probably have 2 synths. You'd have a drum. That would be on like channel 10, right? That this would be on channel 1. Channel 2, and then your MIDI would have all those channels and all the notes, and it would drive them through, and then these would come out to the wave recorder, and you'd watch the little bar go. Does this still work? I don't know. I've never actually done that. But that's, was one of the functions of SynthEdit. Signal types. Patch cords and plugs are color-coded depending on signal type. Blue, normal audio or control voltage signal, also called volts. Red, text data used by text entry module. Green, a list of values, for example, waveform names, otherwise known as list. Yellow, MIDI data, so specifically exclusive MIDI. And there are a couple other colors. I'll probably have to review those some other time. Do a UI2 video. Note, SynthEdit will not allow you to connect patch cords to plugs of different signal types. So this is for the most part true. It's completely true in the GUI modules. You do need to convert between them. For the DSP modules, things like volts and I believe integer, float, they're cross-compatible. You do not need to convert. However, sometimes it's a good idea, especially like for zipper sounds. Volts will pump faster, and then you really need it to, and it'll create like a zipper sound. So you kind of want to convert. You want to convert between them, but again, that's more advanced tutorial, more intermediate stuff. Using SynthEdit with a sequencer. SynthEdit is not a sequencer. To record your own music, you need a sequencer application as well. There are 2 ways SynthEdit can be used with your sequencer program. Using MIDI files, using a MIDI loopback. A good list of sequencers can be found here. I am not following that. Using MIDI files. Record your music using a separate sequencer application to save it as a standard MIDI file. In SynthEdit, load the MIDI file into the MIDI player module. Its a big advantage is the elimination of MIDI timing problems. SynthEdit's internal MIDI connections transmit instantly at very high speed, offers rock-solid timing, better than any hardware MIDI setup. Using MIDI loopback. In order to use SynthEdit with your sequencer in real time, you will need to use a MIDI loopback. This is a separate piece of software that redirects your sequence's MIDI output to SynthEdit's MIDI input. After installing the loopback, configure SynthEdit for external MIDI input. The file live.sc1 is already set up to do this. I'm not sure if it even still exists. Set SynthEdit's MIDI input to the loopback port using the preferences dialog. This will populate once you have your MIDI loopback running. Set your sequencer's track MIDI output to the same loopback port. So say for instance SynthEdit or FL Studio, once you have your loopback in, you'd have your MIDI out, and then it would travel through digital space inside your computer and land in SynthEdit, where SynthEdit is listening on that port. Push SynthEdit's play button, then switch to your sequencer application. Any MIDI data sent from your sequencer should now go to SynthEdit. So this would be like for testing. I used to use it for testing. You can say in FL Studio have a MIDI out running, and you have some quick little jam going, and you turn on SynthEdit, and you can have it testing some of the functions that are happening inside SynthEdit. Just get the sound going and checking. However, that said, I do recommend building, because sometimes when you're in the SynthEdit environment isn't exactly the same as when you bring it into the DAW or the host. It may act a little different, so you can test in SynthEdit, do a couple things, but always test, always save, test, build, repeat. If your sequencer supports audio tracks, you may need to select its direct sound driver for audio output. A good free MIDI loopback here is Hubis MIDI loopback device, or you can use Windows XP MIDI yoke. Looks good. There is a better MIDI loopback out there. However, I'm not going to recommend one at this point. Do your research. Performance. I need to get rid of these screens here. Running a software synth alongside a sequencer is very demanding on PC. For good timing, you will need to minimize SynthEdit's latency. See in the preference dialog. Unfortunately, this will increase the processor load even more. Setting SynthEdit sample rate the same as the sequencer should help performance, but again, running SynthEdit at 44 kHz or more requires a lot of processing power. You will find that many synths and effects at once will overload your CPU. You can avoid this by using SynthEdit's render to disk feature to create your final mix. Using the render to disk feature will overcome limitations in processing, but you can't hear the audio while you're making adjustments. To get around this, muting some of the modules, for example, once you have your drums mixed okay, mute them, then you work on the bass line and lead sounds. So I imagine like in the 90s, this was amazing. I mean, like, it probably was. It's like having, your favorite synthesizers all at your fingertips. Unfortunately, technology moved fast. Now we have so many more things, and 44 kilohertz isn't that bad. I mean, 96,000, even 96 ain't even that bad anymore either. It's hard, but anyway. So that's what was SynthEdit was. This is an older documentation, true. However, much of it is still very rock solid. Tutorials and reference information. So this is tutorials. Learn how to use SynthEdit with step-by-step tutorials that will guide you through building your first software synthesizer. Once you have completed that, you can progress onto more complex tasks or learn how to take advantage of SynthEdit's powerful advanced features, such as creating VST plugins. Reference information. Handy reference information that covers everything from converting volts to pitch to tips on recreating some classic synthesizer sounds. There's the SynthEdit tutorials, of course. Signal level conversion. So this is a whole, documentation in itself. So the way SynthEdit works is it works in volts. And So in this chart here, we have frequency and volts. It's logarithmically or exponentially translated through the volts. Probably doesn't make a lot of sense to a beginner, but it's the way it is. And there's a lot of formulas for converting, which come in handy for, hitting those numbers that you need. Here's the VCA response. Of course, the VCA is a voltage-controlled amplifier, which could be, your volume control, or it reacts to your envelope. Envelope is the way the sound is formed. And here are some of the ways that the voltage-controlled amplifier responds. The decibel mode, the human ear hears this is a constant natural fade, so it's more natural. The exponential mode, this scale imitates the voltage drop of a discharging capacitor. Many hardware synths generated their envelopes using this message, as it would sound similar to the decay curve of a natural sound. And of course, there's linear. This is the most direct level of controlling level. However, to the human ear, the sound fades in an irregular way, appearing to go too quiet too quickly at the end. And there's some math for converting between these. Voltage to time conversions. The envelope generator module's times are based on a time sent scale. This is similar to the decibel scale, where you get finer control over short envelope segments. So again, this is another curve for the conversion. Here's the math here. And there used to be an older ADSR or envelope. We have a newer envelope, which is apparently faster. Some more conversion here. MIDI 2CV portamento time, MIDI 2CV and keyboard 2 portamento time. So this is a newer version. These are the older version math. And that's signal levels, conversions. This is, I look at this quite a bit. This is what I come back to constantly. Technical specifications. Okay, so this again is its own sort of tutorial. Doesn't have a whole lot to do with SynthEdit. It does. SynthEdit processes all signals internally at 32 bits floating points. Sample rate, of course, you can select that from preferences. Latency, again, can be selected from preferences. And you can use either a Windows driver or an ASIO driver. Polyphony. SynthEdit defaults to 6-voice polyphony. However, you can change this up to a maximum of 128 voices supported by MIDI. Again, we'll look at polyphony maybe later. Feedback loops is another big subject, so I won't be covering that. It's just that you cannot connect it, you cannot connect something to itself, kind of thing. So, I got no real good examples. You just can't. It's not like hardware where you can just, run a signal through itself and supercharge it. So there is modules to allow it. It just adds a millisecond of delay. A couple samples of delay. Sub-controls. These are how controls are created. And I remember we were talking about the standard control functions or the standard control modules here. This is a big mess. It's okay, so these are the controls. Well, because these are so plain and so ordinary, I mean, you can change the raster. However, there are better ways of creating controls and defining them any way you want and making them look any way you want. Again, this is a documentation for another time. Its own thing. Tricks and traps. So feedback paths, optimizing CPU usage, removing denormal numbers, setting delay times, troubleshooting problems with VST plugins. Types of synthesis, phase distortion, frequency modulation. And of course, all the modules, got custom modules, about custom modules, installing custom modules, standard modules, got a giant list here. Registering your copy of SynthEdit. SynthEdit is shareware. To enable all of SynthEdit's features, you can purchase a personal registration code online. Registering your copy of SynthEdit gives you control over the number of patches in your VST plugin. Removes references to SynthEdit in the VST plugin title and about box. There is no indication that the VST was made with SynthEdit. Allows the plugin author to add a neg screen to VST plugins created with SynthEdit. Provides free updates from versions 1 to 2 to 2, etc. Version 1.x will be current for 1 year. Also, multi-channel audio in and out. Demo supports only 2 in, 2 out. Payment is via a reputable German company called Sheritz. You can pay using one of the following methods: credit card, Switch Solo, bank wire transfer, check US dollar currency, cash by mail, or PayPal. And of course, you got the purchaser registration code and entering your registration code. Not something I'll probably cover. Software license agreement. I am not reading that. Something you should consider yourself. Frequently asked questions. So this looks like a bunch of older stuff. Maybe we'll cover it some other time. I'll make a little blurb about it. Other than that, that was pretty much the most part of the manual. I will come back for tips and tricks and types of synthesis. And perhaps subcontrols. Some of the stuff I left out. So we ended on signal level conversion. And that's it. That's all. I got stuff to do. So until next time.